We should be getting started. The other two hopefully will check in shortly. Today's meeting, as you know by the agenda, is going to be conservation subdivisions and ridge lines. We talked about both of those topics, for a meeting or two recently. There are two that are time consuming because there's so much information that needs to be devoured, if you will, in order to get them where we really need to have them. The conservation subdivision, they've had Labella that work on that. That committee has had Labella work on that topic. And I know they're going to meet again next Monday, and hopefully they'll have something pretty well ironed out so that, can move to us so we can see, what our thoughts on it are. I've got an individual that, is going to present both of these today, and is Doug, and he's been heavily involved with it. And the reason that we're into these two topics is that's something the development office and would like to see move forward so that they got something with a little more teeth, although the planning board is more than likely going to be the committee that will decide, have some flexibility in regards to it once they become code. So are there any questions from anybody before I turn it over to Doug? If not, then Doug, I'll hand it to you.
Great. So actually, I guess let me just kind of walk through a couple of things with you guys and talk about some stuff, and then we can share some screens and everything. So I missed your last ordinance committee meeting. I was away. Did you, I'm sorry, a little housekeeping here. You talked about form-based code at that?
Yes.
And then you also, I think, talked about, I think you talked a little about the conservation subdivision stuff at that meeting, right?
Right. The form-based code, we move forward out of committee towards to the different, committees that have to review that to be ready for the public hearing before the town board.
Okay. All right. Gary, if we can just pause for a second before we get into conservation. I think, Bob, you had a question you were saying about the form-based code.
I don't want to mess up the flow today, but I poured through the form-based code. I was excited by the potential and what I'm reading, but I'm trying to figure out the role of ZBA in with form-based code, and I'm wondering if there's going to be any training for ZBA members, and I'm just a little unclear in how this is going to work with ZBA, and maybe it's the answer was right in front of me and I missed it. But let me ask Gary or anybody else. Do you see implications for ZBA that might require us to be further trained?
So
I was looking at it's section 2J, for instance. If
section 2J.
Yeah, I mean, underneath the overview.
You saw this, right, Bob? You saw this chart, this flow chart, right?
Yeah.
And so predominantly, a lot of this will be handled by, I would think the planning board, truthfully. And we'll definitely be doing trainings and those types of things to answer that question. But, then if it doesn't fit within the confines of the form-based code, which is designed to be very open intentionally so that basically almost everything would fit in.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't, then somebody would still be able to get some relief by going to the zoning board.
That part I get. They're in the, there was one, and it was called J62 under that section 2. It just, one of the quotes is that the non-conforming structure cannot be expanded or enlarged, or we can't increase the level of unconformity. And I just wonder if that's something that is sort of new, or we've sort of been operating that way, but we don't have that in writing. And I understand there's a big difference with districts. The Lake District all the time we're dealing with pre-existing nonconformity. But I'm just wondering now with this with the form-based code and that part of the town that we're addressing, if we're going to be living in two different worlds, or if it's sort of the same, but I just don't see the forest through the trees.
So I think a lot of the, generally speaking, so this was a topic of discussion, I guess is what I would say, Bob, as the form-based code was being discussed, because this is very different for this specific area of the town.
Right.
And, the intent, I believe, here is to really make it so that non-conforming structures are brought either into conformance, or that their degree of nonconformity is lessened in order for them to continue to be essentially in existence. So maybe a little tighter on the rules and regulations for this specific area of Uptown. But again, it turns so much of it on the head, right? Like, so instead of somebody applying for a setback variance because they are going to be too close to the road, they may need to apply for a setback variance for being too far away from the road.
Right.
So it really kind of changes. So when you think about that, the degree of nonconformity is going to be significantly different. So for instance, maybe in that same analogy, somebody where they would have had to come to the zoning board in the past to get a variance to add on the front of their building closer to 332, for instance, is now going to be able to do that without needing a variance. But they might need a variance because maybe they're not going to build all the way to the minimum of what they're supposed to be. Okay. So they would be lessening the degree of nonconformity in that particular situation.
Okay. Now the criteria we use is, and I'm not going to belabor this, but one of the things in my mind is we often talk about the character of the neighborhood. And when we do that currently with ZBA, we're talking about the real, not the ideal. And it seems to me with form-based, the character of the neighborhood is more about the ideal. And I guess I just need a little, direction on that, because that's different neighborhoods have different characters, but it sounds like what we're trying to do is we're trying to relate to a vision we have with form-based.
Well, the form-based code is specifically tied to the Uptown study. So the ideal is the Uptown study. And so it's that plan that was created. That was step one, where everybody came together, the community, the town board, the planning board, everybody, all the boards got together. We went through that process for a couple of years and then adopted that plan. And then that plan, the Uptown plan, is kind of the ideal, right?
Yes, I agree.
And then the form-based code comes along to enact the plan.
Right.
So you're right. So there's definitely going to be the overwhelming majority of the buildings are not in conformance with that plan, probably, because the 150 or 100 whatever it was foot setback, using that same example again, that was a requirement up until now. Now we're going to say, oh, we've changed our mind. Right. Yep. So it's a big change.
Oh yeah. So like I said, we may need to may need a little more training with the ZBA, because I'm on board with this. But I think the change from the character of the neighborhood being right now real, what we do, versus form-based and where we're going with the overall plan, with the ideal. I think that it'll be interesting how this proceeds. I'm on board with it, but I think there could be a few bumps in the road.
Sure. Okay. All right. And then Shauna will be working with all the boards, and then we'll do some additional training, and we'll probably end up bringing Kimberly in to do some training, I would think, with Kimberly from Bergman, with all of the boards and everything in terms of the best way to think about this and use this and that sort of thing. By the way, just a side note, and I know Chuck, you had asked about this too, and I'm sorry, I'm jumping around here. We're going to do like an orientation with Shauna. She just started full time for us last week. And so we're going to get that set up so that we can get all the boards in, or some representatives from the various boards, and get going on that. But all right.
Thank you.
Sure. Gary, okay. What do you want to start with? Conservation subdivision?
Yeah, why don't we do that? Because the Ridgeline is certainly going to take longer.
Right. So conservation subdivision, you know, and I think some of you have been involved in our conservation project team that has been looking at this as we've worked through some changes. I believe there was a new version that Barb Johnson, I believe, had sent out actually last Friday. I don't know if everybody got that or not, of the most. No. All right.
No.
So we'll make sure that actually I'm just pulling that up here. You see that some may have gotten it and some not. It looks like it went to the project team here, but not a lot of can you see this, the red line changes here and stuff on my screen? I think I'm sharing my screen here. That not a significant, I don't think, number of changes. We've kind of walked through this a couple of different times with the conservation team and kind of gone through some of this stuff. I don't know, Gary, I think this is ready to come to the ordinance committee, but I wanted to kind of go through it myself one last time too, and just double check with Barb Johnson. But this is the red line version that she's provided here. Relative to the conservation subdivision. You know, obviously you can see the keywords here that she's added, procedures, conservation assets. I think one of the bigger changes was we had talked about this, the applicability of in the classes, class 1, class 2, and class 3. And then she updated the little graph here in terms of what we're talking about, constrained land and the uses and those sorts of things. So let me ask this, do the ordinance committee members feel like you need to have Barb Johnson come back and walk through all of these changes, or kind of, I guess that was my question, is I wasn't sure how comfortable everybody was with this, if you want to go through it again, or.
Well, there's 3 or 4 of us that, you know, are on the conservation meeting or committee. And so we've heard it. I guess it'd be up to Bob and John, you know, whether they want that to happen. We certainly, you know, can't move it forward. I don't feel we should be moving it forward until we hear from the subcommittee anyways, which meets on Monday. And if we get information from them, we certainly could do it, have it on the agenda for the second meeting of this month, and decide then how we're going to proceed forward with it.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's to your point, Gary. I think that the committee meets next Monday.
They do.
14th. Yeah. I guess the other thing we could do, if we could certainly invite all the ordinance committee members to attend that committee meeting, because I think that's going to be kind of the final review in the project team. It might be a good way for those that aren't normally attending to just hear firsthand from Barb Johnson and everything too, in terms of the conservation subdivision. So has the ordinance committee talked about it previously? I just don't even remember, to be honest.
Hey, yeah, we talked about it briefly, I would say, you know, trying to think here.
Okay. All right. So there are some changes relative to the development standards and stuff. So maybe instead of going line by line through all of this, Gary, I'll send this back out since the project team is still working on it also. And we'll see what they say in terms of the final changes, their final recommendations, and we could certainly invite the ordinance committee to come to that.
It'd make a good transition too, so
Right.
handoff, so that's a good idea.
Okay. Bob, I just want to make sure I have you guys. I'm just going to forward this to you guys right now so you'll have it. But okay, so you want to jump over to ridgelines?
Yes.
All right. So just as a refresher, actually, you know what, I'm going to share my screen here again for a quick second, because this is going to be a refresher for all of us. I feel like kind of together getting back up to speed on this. So if I go to the town website, this is the easiest way I know how to tell you guys where all this stuff is. Go to the town website. Then I'm going to go to projects here. And then over here under current projects, list any number of projects that we're currently working on in terms of form-based code is there, anything there, but natural resource protection. So I'm going to open that link. And then I can see the natural resource protection stuff, the NRI stuff that the town has been working on, the steep slope stuff that was already done, the Ridgeline information, and then some of the other topics. So I'm going to go in here to Ridgeline. So if you remember, there were three areas that our NRI team, I believe from like 2016, 2017 was originally charged with working on steep slopes, ridge lines, and then shoreline. They completed steep slopes. They never got to shoreline. Ridgeline they started on, but I think that probably what happened is the ridgeline stuff got very complicated very quickly, and it got very muddied also with Viewshed stuff. And the project team, and I believe even the ECB was involved in putting together some variety of different things. And they had looked at view sheds, and then there was all kinds of discussion about whether or not we should be regulating view sheds and people's view of the lake or from the lake back up, or whether it should just be ridge lines, to the point where the town board authorized us, I believe it was 2017, to hire Saratoga Associates, who had done a lot of the ridgeline work and the original comprehensive plan for the town of Canandaigua back in 2003, to actually propose ridgeline law. And so they worked through a couple of variations with the project team at that time, and came up with, and it's right here. It's I'm going to just scroll down. The January 2018 draft. I'm sorry, that's the view. That says Viewshed, but it's actually the ridgeline. I think it's a Viewshed and ridgeline protection law, because they were using both words. So this is where the ordinance committee, you're kind of starting, and it's been a couple of years since this project team has worked on this, but you're kind of starting from scratch. You're kind of starting with a blank sheet, with the point of you have actually Saratoga Associates has actually drafted this for us. And then it's a question of whether or not it's still the direction that you want to go. But let's just kind of walk through it section by section. This is going to take a while, and I would think this was going to take a couple of meetings for us to really understand and kind of talk about this and digest this. But so obviously the intent of the law is to promote development. So this would actually be the draft law, blending the natural terrain with the scenic character and the quality of the Canandaigua Lake Viewshed. So the next section here talks about the visually subordinate, and it references the ridgeline here. So the intent to not to require the complete screening of all new development, but it recognizes the development might be visible if sought out by the viewer. So it's not to say that basically you're never ever going to be able to regulate that you're not going to be able to see a house from Canandaigua Lake, right? That would be impractical to be able to say that, but you know, there may be some ways that buffering can occur, such as, and they give examples here, uninterrupted forests, ridgelines, and hillsides. Any questions so far? Let me just pause for a second. Is this kind of the direction that, Gary, that you wanted to go with going through this? I'm not sure how.
Yes, and I neglected to mention at our last meeting, we spent quite a bit of time on it. Unfortunately, we had Chris Jensen there, and he also showed us a map of throughout the town of where different ridge lines are. Yep.
So those maps and everything, they're all right here on the website. All these different ridgeline maps of all these different things, all the different viewshed maps that were done. All of this information is right here. Okay, so let me ask you this, Gary. Where do you guys want to go with this then?
May I ask a general question? Real quick?
Absolutely.
Is our intent to try to protect the view to and from the lake only, or are we looking at anything that's on a hill? Because that's the problem I think we've gotten into in confusing ridge lines with view sheds. And, you know, a view shed is obviously, I think I interpret that to be a view from the lake or to the lake. So it's essentially a lake premise or lake based, where a ridge line could be anywhere in the town, correct?
Yeah, at any of
Um,
those higher points. Yeah, absolutely.
Because
Well, wait a minute, isn't that definition of a view shed? I mean, wherever you are, I remember the last meeting, Chris was pointing out that difference between ridgeline and view shed, because someplace in this document up in the front here, it says something to the effect of the view shed is where you are looking up. For example, Middle Cheshire Road, looking up at Harvest View, that used to be you could call it a ridge line, you could call it a view shed line. Now there are houses on it and they're not screened, you know. I mean, and this is where I think this is where one of the big breakdowns occurred
that's where we got
earlier.
hung up. Yeah.
How do you count the spot you're at looking up, wherever you are in the town of Canandaigua, whether that be, you know, out on the water in the lake or on Woolhouse Road or wherever. I mean, that's to me, that's one of the primary questions, and that's where we really have some issues.
Well, maybe a view shed is a subordinate to a ridge line. That ridge line is the general topic, and then a view shed is a subsection, one of the types of ridge lines. And the view shed would be primarily based on again, views to and from the lake, where ridge lines could be, as I said, anywhere as shown on that map that Chris shared with us, which was again all over the town.
Hold on a minute.
So I don't know what Chris showed you. Did he go through the Saratoga law?
Yeah, it was the
Yeah.
map from gosh, what was it, 014 or something like that.
Well, Chris created a bunch of maps, and those are a lot of the maps that are over here on this website,
Yeah.
on this webpage. And you've got these, but I don't think that that's what the Saratoga law used. That was what Chris had come up with.
Yeah, right. So one of the big questions is this supposed to be just if you're in a boat on the lake and you're looking west to town of Canandaigua, is that all we choose to protect? Or do we choose to protect ridge lines and subordinate view sheds away from the lake? I mean, once you get past, like on my road, Middle Cheshire Road,
Yep.
you can't see the lake, but I can look to the west and I can see I can see a real peak, a ridge line, and I can see some that are, you know, closer in that are not as high as that final ridge line, but, you know, nonetheless, they appear to be, you know, peaks of those particular hills. So I think, to me, one of the principal things that has to be decided is where are we viewing these lines, whether they be ridge lines or subordinate view sheds.
So that's where the definition here I've got pulled up on the screen in the draft law from Saratoga Associates. The common public viewing area is anywhere looking west from the lake.
Well, what about if I have a place in Fallbrook or, you know, some of those others, Sandy Beach? I can certainly, you know, if I was there, I could see a lot more than anybody on the west side of and the lake.
Right, but this law specifically was looking west from the lake, and that was intentional because what they had said at the time, and Joyce would be a good one to chat with about this too, because she was involved with all this, is that was such a small area, and the area to the east of, for instance, Fallbrook, that area would be, that's all in the MU03. And then it's just a small portion of the town of Canandaigua. The rest of it's all either the town of Hopewell or the town of Gorham. So that's why they concentrated specifically looking west from the lake at any point on the lake, but looking west from the lake.
Why
So
is it
you
just
could
the
be
lake?
at Fallbrook in the water and look west, and then that would be the common public viewing area.
Right.
Why is it just the lake?
Well, that was their definition. This is exactly why this thing went nowhere. Because this is exactly the types of conversations you got into.
Well, it has the potential of going in the same direction.
I know with Lakeview Meadows with Section 9, when we reviewed that, we were very concerned about making sure that the townhouses were not visible from the lake, so they were on the west side of the ridgeline. But what that created is what you have out there now is people that are upset that you're looking at the back of the townhouses from Middle Cheshire. And they say,
Yeah.
oh, you violated the ridgeline guidelines because it's sitting up on a ridge and you can see them. And I don't think that's not how the planning board interpreted it at the time. We were primarily protecting the view from the lake and not necessarily worried about the view from Middle Cheshire.
Well, when I was on the planning board, we negotiated with Morels for 6 months, Chuck, to move it east so that those buildings would not be as visible from Middle Cheshire Road nor from the lake. And we had it set up that way. But then, you know, the style of house changed from single family home to the townhome style. And, you know, now we have what we have. So, I mean, that's where you get into this discussion of what is it, ridge lines, is it view sheds? If it's just from the lake looking, you know, west into the town, the very peaks of what you can see from the lake, it should be very easy to protect them. But is that all we're going to protect in this effort?
That looks familiar.
Yeah. That's
Good
what
question.
Chris put together, isn't it,
Right.
Doug? Yeah.
This one, yes. This is the one where he had identified the viewshed area along with the ridge lines, the primary ridge lines in the area. Again, it's you know, it's whatever. Truthfully, it's whatever you guys want to do, recommend. I mean, there's any number of different directions this could go. This was the project team had worked on this for quite a bit of time.
Oh, yeah.
But it's exactly what we're talking about now. It got very complicated very quickly, and they really struggled with it. So the area application, the viewshed and ridgeline protection area shall follow the town of Canandaigua with site plan. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought there was an area that was identified as part of this. It gives the planning board the authority to kind of go through, but maybe it was under the definitions. Oh yeah, as identified on the viewshed and ridgeline protection area map. So.
Partially is a viewshed as depicted.
So
well, if it's strictly from the lake, what that means, I mean, if we interpret it that way, what that means is every hill that doesn't have a house on it, that isn't visible from the lake, will have in the future. And the top of the hill will be clear cut so the house has a perfect view all the way around. Just pointing that out, not saying I'm in favor of either way right now. I'm still thinking about this.
Sure.
I guess I would have to weigh in and say that it seems like everything is about the lake. And I live on Middle Cheshire and close to, or I live just off it in one of the Morels, and I can look down Middle Cheshire and the view is great. And I love it. And I'd like to protect that. But it seems like everything is about the lake and not so much, so many of the other really nice views we have with our topography in Canandaigua. And I guess I'm questioning having it be lake views are the highest priority, but maybe the other priorities aren't in place. I guess I would throw that out there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm saying too, Bab. That's one of the big hangups that occurred, you know, it kind of got this pushed aside in favor of other ordinances that were viewed as perhaps easier to tackle.
Right. So I wanted to highlight this for you too, just so everybody's aware. So remember, we just talked about what the definition of common public viewing area was. It's looking west from the lake. So applicants shall submit plans that document how the project layout and design minimizes visual impact from the lake, basically,
Right.
to the maximum extent, you know. So this really is exactly what you're just saying, but it is centered, this law, this draft law centered on the lake.
Right.
But it says common public viewing areas, which I would interpret to mean any road in the town of Canandaigua.
No, it's defined, Terry. It's defined down here. Everything is common public viewing area, but it's defined at the bottom here. Let me go back to it.
Well, perhaps the definition is incorrect.
Here's the definition of it right here. So yes, we could change the definition, absolutely, but that's what the current proposed definition is.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Yep.
So it's from the lake. So it makes it all about the lake.
Everything's about the lake.
Right.
Yeah, and I guess I'd be concerned living on just off Middle Cheshire. The what I understand to be the Cook property, someday if that is sold to developers, if we don't have something locked in here, what's going to happen is the charm of Middle Cheshire Road and the nice views and what you have will definitely be endangered if we don't have some kind of language. If that's what if we feel that way.
Exactly.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Do you support this concept of making the developers, let me go back here for a second. Let's forget the definition of common public viewing area for a second. But for instance, applicants must submit plans that document the project layout and design and the visual impact from the common public viewing area. Do you support that concept? Are you okay with making the developer, whoever that is, incorporate the viewing aspects as part of a law? Let's say we rewrite the definition, but are you okay with this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Any place, yes.
Yes.
Okay. So then let's go to the next section here. So the viewshed analysis, line of sight profiles, relationship to the development. So you're okay with all of that type of stuff, I think, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The tree cutting, the grading, all that kind of stuff. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously they need to minimize the impact and then interpret relative to the facades. That's all here. Just want to see. Yeah, after construction, the plan has to include what the visual impact, again, from the view shed or the common public viewing area. Development at top ridge lines should be avoided. Where possible, buildings shall be site downgrade at a distance sufficient to ensure that the roof line does not break the visible horizon as seen from any public viewing area. Again, let's set the definition aside for a second, but are you okay with this?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So that's basically the same. It's not intended to limit timber harvesting. Forest density. It sounds like to me, because I think a lot of the rest of this, you guys, based on these conversations, you're in support of a lot of the rest. It sounds to me like we need to change the definition based on what I'm hearing.
Definitely.
Right.
And then the rest of it would probably fall in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I agree completely, Doug. It's that, as Bob said, it's just from the lake at this point, the way this is defined. And really, there are a lot of other public viewing areas other than the lake. So somehow it's got to be included.
And I'll give you an example of somebody that has a grievance. Some of the people who were early in the Morel project, and now all of a sudden with the townhouses being built up on that hill, their life has changed in terms of the view they have. They're basically in the shadow of that when they look up. And when they bought, they never thought that would be developed. And of course, maybe nobody did. But those people, have a grievance. Their life has changed in terms of, now being in the shadow of what was built up above. And So in terms of view and all that, that's a big deal for, I'm sure, for those people.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
just as a side point, Bob, we get emails almost weekly from people who live up on that hill now, asking us to do something about Ridgeline Development.
Yeah,
I find that kind of ironic.
yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
But the view from that hill is over toward Bristol Mountain, and it's a beautiful view.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I mean, it's in the eye of the beholder, I guess,
Yeah.
whether you're looking up or looking down. If you're
Yeah,
looking,
you're right. That you make a good point. Yep.
you're looking down, it's a beautiful view. You're looking up. Okay, I'm sitting in the middle of Cheshire, and I'm looking up at a hill, and then town has the top. Guys, it's going to be tough to control that.
It is.
That is
It
going to be. I
really
mean,
is.
like Terry said, the lake issue, the view from the lake, to and from the lake, that's something that I think is manageable. But boy, you get back into the hinterlands, and if it's on a hill, you can't build up on the hill.
Well, you can't, doesn't say you can't build up on the hill. It just says downgrade from the peak.
Yeah,
And screening and those kind of things, which we pretty much all agree with,
right.
as Doug had pointed out here. So it's in that definition of common public viewing area. And
Yeah.
it seems to me that if people are willing to accept not building on ridgelines as viewed from the lake, if they're willing to accept that, why wouldn't they be willing to accept, on one of these other hills, as Bob was pointing out, that they don't build up on the peak, they build off the peak, one side or the other, so it seems to me that people would, if they're willing to accept the former, they should be willing to accept the latter.
Right.
So using the Lakewood Section 9 as an example, and to your point, Chuck, and so the construction of that with it on the back side of the hill from the lake may very well be in compliance with this law the way it's drafted. But Terry, to your point, you said from a public street. So if we added those words in there, that section probably wouldn't have been able to be built the way it is. And that's I guess my question, where are they able to build then? Are we at that point telling them they can't build? Or are we just telling them that they've got to pull it down farther even and then buffer it? And is that what you want to do?
Yeah, pull it
Yep.
pull it down further and buffer it. And that is what we had worked out with the Morels back in 2006 and 7, was that they would push the development to the east, rearrange they had it designed as kind of an oval, a racetrack almost, and they came up with a better design. But what they were going to do at that point in time was to extend that berm that was up there at that time, move the houses that were on the western portion of Section 9 further east. They were compressing it a little bit, and they would keep the roof lines. You'd be able to see some of the roof lines, but they were going to screen it in such a way to produce kind of a keyhole effect for the people that would purchase those homes. And, there would be some visibility, but it would be, heavily buffered and burned. And, that's the kind of thing I think that this law should be aimed at, is that to stay off that peak as much as possible, and screening, not just a tree every 100 feet, but maybe, some heavier screening, that breaks up the view.
I would agree. I don't think it's all or nothing. I think that that there's middle ground. And after trees grow, when you have mature veteran trees, it really makes a big difference too. Because right now that building up on top looks pretty stark from many different viewpoints, and maybe that will change given time. I can't say for sure.
Oh, well, sure, Bob. 50 years from now, it'll look different.
Right, and so will we.
So I want to go back to, so you want this law to include more than the way it's currently defined, and it's just west of the lake. So let me ask you a question at that first. Do you want it to include east of the lake, or just leave it west of the lake?
Well,
I'm trying to break this. I'm trying to break it down in segments so I can understand what to bring back to you guys.
Well, since most of us live on the west side, it would look kind of parochial if we said just the west side. So, I mean, it should be, the law should apply to the entire town, in my view. East or west, I mean, that, you know.
Yeah, I agree, because on the east side, there's not really a lot that you're going to be able to see from the lake, I wouldn't think, with any development that takes place there, so it should be both sides.
You got one in the hopper right now with Carol Eifert. I mean, that'll, you know, that's application is in. So, and it's got it can be seen from the lake.
Oh, it can be? Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yep. And we're wrestling with it because it's tough to enforce any regulations because we don't have any, but we can do some arm twisting, but that's about it.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Terry, you mentioned visible from any street, basically, or something to that effect.
Well, I mean, that phrase, common public viewing area, I mean, it's defined as being the lake right now, but common public, I mean, we don't have like mini parks all scattered along all of our roads, but so as you're driving around the town, common public viewing areas, it just occurs to me that be our roads, our road structure. I don't know what else to call it, to be honest.
You have the scenic views, the one out on 21. I know, Tom, you remember we had an application for a house just to the east of that, and we wanted to make sure that the house and the barn did not in any way affect the view from the scenic viewing area. I mean, that's one area you definitely want to protect and include. Boy, making roads being part of the public common viewing area, that's.
Well, what would it be then? It can't just be McJanet Park. How about Miller Park, the gazebo up on top of that? If we say that that's a common viewing area, you can see the whole freaking town from up there. So, I mean,
good point.
You know, there's got to be some. I just pick roads because that's that's kind of common. We all use them. I don't really have a better definition at this point.
Right. Let me ask you a hypothetical question. Let's say I'm going to use Moran Road, not the one off of Woolhouse, right? So it's a dead end street that's kind of honestly out in the middle of nowhere. There are some houses there, and there's some farmland there, and there's some subdivided properties and stuff. What if somebody wants to come in and build a house up at the top of the piece of property, up at the top of the little knoll, and you can see it from Moran Road? Do we care?
No,
I wouldn't.
no.
But if we put in the law visible from a street, then that becomes a problem, right?
And this is kind of why the thing got pushed aside originally. So.
It's also why developers have the upper hand, because we sort of know where we want to be at the end, but trying to come up with a structure to get us there is bogging us down, it seems.
Yeah, exactly, Bob.
And that's why Joyce passed it off to me, and I had nobody to pass it off to.
Is it better to just leave it as it exists with guidelines rather than trying to make it so formal?
Guidelines don't work.
Well, so much of this is depending on interpretation.
Right. It is. You're absolutely right, Tom. Let me ask you guys another question, because I'm just trying to help figure out where you guys are at. In the analogy, the example that I just used with the house on Moran Road, right? I heard you clearly all say, nobody cares, let them build it, right? But when you're talking about a housing development that's visible from Middle Cheshire Road, people care. So do we base it on a number of units? Like, for instance, we do in the code, like subdivision, it's a major housing development. I think if it's 4 units or more, do we do something like that where this is applicable to either a larger housing development, either by acreage or once you construct, or if you're planning to build more than 4 units, for instance, then these regulations apply. Do you want to look at it like that?
Yeah, let me add one more thing, because what goes around comes around. What we're trying to do with form-based code is sort of support a dream. And when you're a homeowner on Middle Cheshire, you have the same feelings. You don't have a form-based code, but you are trying to support a dream. And you're very nervous about developers, exploding your dream.
Yeah. Well, what's to prevent, Moran Road, Doug, somebody sells off, that's probably AR2, so they sell off a 2-acre lot. Someone builds a house there. Then the next year, whoever the landowner is, sells off another one. Maybe 2 that year, maybe 3 the next year. So all of a sudden it's, they escape it by building 1 and 2 instead of 5 and 6, I mean, these guys are smart guys. We all know that. And they try to find the loopholes in all of the codes that we develop. And, that one of the issues we face also.
But isn't that a different seller? That's not, for instance, and I'm gonna pick on Morel for a second. That's not Morel who's gonna build 1 house a year, because that's not gonna support their business model, right?
Right.
That's somebody, that's a farmer selling land or something or other. That's a different thing. Versus like Lakewood Meadows, where they're gonna wanna build 60 homes a year or 50 or whatever.
Yeah. I'm just saying that over a period of 4 or 5 years, you could have, 8, 10 houses built in one of those areas. And, it's the same effect 5, 6, 8, 10 years out.
Right.
And I mean, the codes that we develop, we'd love to see them be, carried on to the future. I mean, recognizing that all of our codes have to be evergreen and have the ability to be updated to match the times and all, but
Right.
I don't know, that could be a way to do it, though, is to say that, anything over 4 is a major subdivision. So you'd say if it's a minor subdivision, here's the rules. And, or I mean, if it's anything over the minor subdivision, here are the rules you have to follow. So
now there's always going to be people, and I think back to when this was originally being discussed, right? Priscilla Herbert was one who contacted us fairly regularly, that she supported this in protecting her view of the lake. But that would be for that would be like for construction of 1 house. What we're talking about right now wouldn't protect from 1 house being constructed. So there's always going to be people that I think want to see this a little more strict. But the question is, where do you guys want to go?
Well, and also back to the ideal, because without restraints, Middle Cheshire could become a typical suburban, road with a lot of development and a lot of traffic, and the charm that we currently have would be gone. And there's no doubt about it, with the land that's still available or could be acquired. The future of the road is really in doubt right now in terms of where we're going to go. I'm thankful for the restraints that we have, but I wish we could do more.
Well, that's where, Bob, to your point, the conservation subdivision stuff that we touched on earlier, that I know you guys are going to talk about more. That's why that's so critically important to help protect our strategic farmland protection area, for instance, which is the west side of Middle Cheshire Road. So,
and the lesson is out there. Pittsford had to go back and buy up land to find green space, for balance. And right now, we're in better shape because we have nice green space throughout the town. But I think that's because of our location and how popular we are. I think that's being challenged.
I guess we should note that this doesn't apply entirely to residential. I mean, we got into the situation with the solar farm out there on Monk's Road, and there was, wrestling with the developer to make sure he kept the solar arrays low enough that people that lived up on the hill could see down the valley, south on the lake. So it's not just homes too.
It's true.
True. True. Yeah, it's because, well, let me ask you this, and Terry says this to me all the time. We can always put something in place now, and then we can always go back and change it if we find it needs tweaking or doesn't work or whatever. But, and obviously we always try to do our best effort, but this is a complex one for sure.
Oh, it is.
Do you want to do something now, like if we expand this definition to include the major subdivision? And to your point, Chuck, it's probably not going to do anything to help with the solar farm, for instance. But if we include the major subdivision aspect of it and make it town-wide, that gives you something, I guess. It's more than you have now, I guess is what I would say. Do you want to take that type of approach? I'm just curious.
Well,
that'd certainly be a start.
it's, as you say, it's certainly more than what we have now. And, if we can give the planning board enough tools and enough interpretation to do some arm twisting, as Chuck referred to earlier there, maybe this is where we have to go.
Yeah, and you'll probably get
this is very complex. So.
You'll get some pushback from developers because they're going to
Yeah.
say you're really restricting. I can't use all my land, and you get into that issue. But I guess it's better to have a tougher ordinance on the books and let it be give some relief than not have it at all.
One thing that is different right now, and it's than 4 years, 2017, when this particular code was developed. It came in early 2018. Back then, it was largely, the people involved were largely on our various committees, and Kevin Mulvaney was involved, I remember. But the thing that's different now is that there is some push from some of our residents, to do something, put something in place that's stronger than what we have with the guidelines, to have an actual law in the books. So we do have, that kind of momentum, pushing us forward also. So, but again, the people that are asking for that, have a kind of parochial view. It's what they see out their window. And
Right.
I don't think they all take the time and stop and think through just exactly what we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
This thing is probably one of the most complex. This one is probably easier. This is probably tougher than the chicken law, Gary. It really is.
Can we work the two of them together?
Yeah.
The timing though is pretty good because
This one's pretty foul.
talking to Morel people, they have a certain price point, and they're having trouble now because building new homes is so expensive with supply chain problems, etc.
Yeah.
So there's a possibility that they're going through a pause, and once all that other stuff is taken care of, they'll be back, in a big way. That's sort of the way I'm reading the market from the outside, looking in. But this would be a good time for us to move forward with some initiatives, I think.
Oh, I agree. I think you're right, Bob.
Yeah.
I want to ask you another question here. We've kind of thrown out the concept of town-wide. We kind of use that. This draft local law specifically refers to the Viewshed Ridgeline Protection Area map, which to the best of my knowledge, this is the most recent one. So you'd be talking about this area in the yellow. Do you want to expand that?
Or shrink it.
Or shrink it?
We should probably look at the east side. Just to, to be fair, as Chuck pointed out, there is an application up in the Lincoln Hill area there. The application's already in, so even if we got this thing done in record time, it wouldn't really apply. So.
Well, and I guess here, so let me throw something out. Sorry, I'm asking a lot of questions today. But, you know, I sit on my back deck and I look across the field and I can see off in the distance in my house at Stablegate, I can see Bristol Mountain. If somebody builds a house back there, I'm not looking at Bristol Mountain. Well, that's a
Exactly.
view shed also. So do
Yeah.
you want to, let me ask you this. What if we do away with the map and just give the planning board the flexibility and say it's, you know, if you want us to call it townwide, call it townwide? What do you think?
That might be, again, an easier solution, and then it's up to the planning board to make a value judgment.
Yeah,
Boy,
It's tough.
that's-
it's tough to put all this stuff in words and have
Right.
it be comprehensible.
But I'd rather have it objective than subjective.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, when you're telling a developer you can't put a house there because we think you can't see, you know, the top of Bristol Mountain. Boy, you're waiting for a challenge there.
Mhm.
This yellow area was determined based on elevations. They picked a high, you know, a high point and applied that elevation. Is that how it came up, Doug?
Yeah, it was actually, it was a program that was used, and I think there was a distance. There was a maximum distance that you could see based on if you were in a boat at various points. I want to say they calculated, it's actually on some of this stuff on the website. They used different calculations in terms of different points on a lake in the boat, and then you could see kind of like what you could see from that and everything. They did a lot of work. Chris Jensen did a lot of work with them. The team spent a lot of time kind of going through that and seeing what it would look like and everything. But they ran, these files are huge, so they take a while to load.
I mean,
But-
it's sort of analogous to floodplain because with floodplain, you have a defined limit. And if the developer wants to challenge it, he's got to do a hydraulic study to determine what the actual floodplain limits are based on, you know, detailed calculations. Maybe with this thing, you set the limits, and if a developer wants to challenge it, he's got to do the fly the balloons and do everything that we require in other applications. Like we did with the solar, there we were putting up trial balloons.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But the map, this map with the yellow, again, this is based primarily on the concept of being based the west side of Canandaigua Lake.
Yep.
Obviously.
Yeah, I realize that.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll go back to what I said earlier, that this reminds me a little bit of the form-based code in the sense that let's just say we're the town fathers. We need to be able to put out in words what our vision is and what is the ideal, and then see if we can build a structure that supports that. And it sounds like we've done a good job of that in terms of the momentum and where we are uptown. But maybe this needs the same kind of attention. Once we lose the open land and these things are built, you can't go backwards. And
That's
I
right.
just feel like we're, that we have some pressure on us. And the interesting thing is the value of this real estate's only going to go up based on the current, predictions and the popularity of Canandaigua. But I think we need, from earlier, Doug helped me understand ideal versus real. But we need to put out there verbiage supporting the ideal of what we want for direction.
Yeah.
That all leads back to the definition of common public viewing area,
Yes, it does.
Exactly.
which I guess is our homework assignment. Then would be how would we like to see that definition read? And as far as all the detailed regulations as to what applies to that, whatever definition we come up with, I think we're more or less supportive of those. Maybe some could be, I think a lot of them have to be looked at, but I think that's where we got to start, guys.
Yeah, I believe you're right on that, Chuck. No doubt about it.
I mean, one other thing I was thinking about, do we have scenic highways or scenic roads that we define anywhere? I don't ever recall. I mean, if we were talking about defining streets that had to have a certain protection in terms of ridge lines and all, do we have any roads of that nature in the town?
I don't know
Oh,
that there's
no,
anything
that
officially.
one.
No.
There's New York State Route 21, I think has been designated as something,
Yeah.
off the top of my head, but I don't think there's anything else.
Okay.
Just depends on who you ask.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Well, I was just getting back to, okay, maybe Middle Cheshire is, but Moran Road is not. So, you know, you make
You can pick and choose.
Middle Cheshire as one that has to be scrutinized in any development.
Well,
Just
one
a
thing that
thought.
certainly limits that kind of development is the extension of sewer lines, so.
Yep.
As long as we don't do that.
I get the gist from you guys that you would actually see this, excuse me, you'd rather see this more applicable town-wide and giving the planning board a little more flexibility. Chuck, I know you're concerned about too much. You've got to have some parameters there, but
Yep.
Yeah.
Is that generally kind of where everybody's at?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I believe so.
I mean, as Chuck said, it's having been there, it's a whole lot easier if it's objective and you can point to a chart and say, yeah, it says 10 feet right here and you're at 6 feet. So no, you got to get
Yep.
to 10 somehow.
You're above a certain elevation or something. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a whole lot different when you're sitting in that chair facing these people.
Mhm.
Well, now you sent everything out, right, Doug, in regard to this, to all the
Everybody
ordinance
should have
members?
it.
Okay, so 2 or 3 don't have it, didn't have it before. We'll have a chance to review it. Are you suggesting, Doug, that you're going to put together something in regard to the changes that we discussed, or?
So seriously, Gary, I think I need help from you guys. I
Yeah.
think everybody, maybe if everybody could kind of think about it and even just email Shauna and myself kind of
Okay,
some thoughts. And maybe before your next meeting, we could kind of put together some of that stuff and then review and hopefully before and get that out to you. And we'll kind of work on it too, but you're talking about really opening it up to more than the current draft law by changing the definition. So,
Doug, do you think
That's
there are any other towns that have dealt with the same issue and are further ahead than where we are?
well, yeah, so, and that was one of the reasons why we hired Saratoga Associates, to be honest, because they've done this before. And I remember specifically them talking about, I think that was one of the reasons why they recommended from Canandaigua Lake to make it narrow in scope so that it was more definable, to keep it, to really simplify it.
Yeah.
But in the same effort, then you ignore other portions like our discussion on Middle Cheshire Road.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it all comes down to the common public viewing area. That's the whole key to the thing is what is that? And because as you were stepping through it, Doug, I mean, the protections and staying, downgrade from the peak and all that buffering and all that. I think everyone agrees with all that.
Mhm.
It's just that trying to define common public viewing area, and that's a very individual thing. And I mean, I don't know, there's 5 or 6 of us, we could each submit, as you say, here's what I think, and they could all be different. And how you distill that and get it into a, subjective type of statement is,
And
hate
it
to keep
is,
saying it, but this is one of the big problems we had before.
it is common public viewing area. It's not individual public viewing areas.
No,
So just
but I mean,
because one property owner is upset because they lost the view of the lake entirely, well,
Yeah.
that's,
yeah,
you can't
but
please everybody.
no, but
No.
those are the people that we get the emails from all the time. So trying to please them, and I recognize what you say is true, Chuck. You can't please everybody, but I don't know. Maybe I'm not recommending we do this at this point, but maybe you go back to the lake and say, well, looking uphill from the lake, I mean, that would provide protection for people on Middle Cheshire Road and Route 21 to some extent also. I mean,
Mhm.
you know, it does give an element of protection there, certainly. So.
Let me ask you this. What if we did west of Lake, east of Lake, and add in Middle Cheshire Road? Does that cover the majority of the concerns? As the definition? I mean, we can tweak it and we can always email you stuff, but I mean, I think the majority of what I've heard, I mean, there's other views, right? You could talk about New Michigan, you could talk about even Emerson for that matter, Sand Hill, but we don't get too many complaints about those areas.
No, I think someplace when we were discussing this with Chris, or maybe it's in here someplace, it talks about within a mile of that common area. Wasn't there a reference to that someplace?
I don't remember that.
Remember, I don't know if Chris just said that or.
I don't see anything in the document.
Gosh, I can't remember where I saw that now. Yeah.
All right, we have work
Okay.
to do for sure, Gary.
Yeah. So you want everybody to submit information to you then?
Well,
Doug?
if everybody wants to take a shot at it, and we'll work on it too, and send it back out and see what we can come up with.
Okay.
You know, I think
Is
it's
there,
just going to take some time to kind of work through it.
Is there an opportunity in the future where we could get together in person when we do this? Are we approaching the time when we can meet in the town office? I think I would be in terms of brainstorm or a good discussion. I think in my mind, it would be improved if we could be sitting around a table.
But Bob, as long as you brought that up, the town calendar said that our meeting this morning was in the Oriana room, and I was there and nobody else was.
Oh,
Ooh.
there you go.
Ooh.
So we ought to have the calendar coincide with when we have Zooms and don't.
Good point.
I was wondering where you were, Tom.
Yeah, I wasn't shirking.
We were there. It's the rest of us. The rest
Yeah.
of us were running.
Well,
And maybe I'm the only one, but
I thought,
yeah.
I thought
Did-
finally we were back to that and then nobody showed.
Sorry about that. Back to what I was saying. For me personally, it would be more efficient if we could meet in person.
Agreed.
I
Could
agree
we,
with that.
could we meet there, Doug, at Town Hall, you know, on our next meeting, the 23rd?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, we're to the point now where everything's kind of open back up. The only challenge is the hybrid meetings, you know, when you're doing them by Zoom and everything, it's not going to be the same quality for the user. That's the only thing I just want everybody to be aware of that's participating by Zoom. So I know you don't have as many here that do that, but when you're in a room full of people and you have one camera at the front of the room, it's difficult to hear everybody. So, you know, we're trying to work through that, but that's just the challenge, right? But yes, you could absolutely meet here, no problem at all.
Well, why don't we
Well,
plan that?
if we
it's a-
promised all,
Go ahead, Terry.
I was just going to say, if we all promise to shout so that the people can hear us. I mean, right now, I don't think there's anybody on Zoom here that, you know, I mean, any residents. From looking at participants list here, it doesn't look like, and typically we don't have a big audience, so.
Right, but the one thing
I'm all in
that's
favor of
changed,
meeting face to face.
and that's fine, we can definitely meet in face to face, but I think the one thing that we just need to be mindful of that has definitely changed with COVID is we record all of these meetings. These meetings are all posted, and there's quite a following of people that do view these meetings later, whether that's through the recording, whether that's through YouTube. Fair number. I just got an email this morning from a lady that tells me, actually, I ended up forwarding it to you, Terry, that she watched one of the recordings of a couple of the meetings and she had picked up on something that you had said. So there's a fair number of people that are doing that. That is different. So.
But we could still record it, couldn't we?
I think that's a given.
Absolutely. We could still record it. It's just not going to be the same quality as you guys individually sitting in front of a camera. That's the challenge, but we can definitely still record it.
Well, let's at least try it and see how it goes. And I won't be wearing pajama bottoms when we have our physical meeting.
Are you going to bring the flowers?
Yes.
Terry, make sure you get
Yeah.
a shower.
Yeah.
Well, if it's all right with the committee, I'd like to propose that we have our next meeting on June 23rd at the town hall. I don't know exactly what room at the present time, and you probably don't either, right, Doug?
Either the Ana Linda or the Oriana, one of the two, whichever
Okay.
you want. So
The Oriana is the right size.
Yeah,
You know, have it there then. Is that agreeable to everybody on the committee?
yep.
Yeah, yeah.
And-
23rd, was that always on the calendar, the 23rd or?
No, because those are basically not a regularly scheduled meeting date, because when we set it up, we always met the first Monday of the month.
Right,
And then we decided that we needed another meeting in a month because of some of the items that were appearing before us.
okay.
Maybe for July and August, we'll go back to one meeting a month during the summertime and see if we need to have two on
Okay,
month.
I can make it work, no problem.
Okay. Anything
good.
else? Next meeting, we'll discuss this, the ridge lines, and also we should have some information back from the Conservation Subdivision Committee in regards to their meeting, which is next Monday. And anybody like Bob, and I'll get a hold of John and make him aware about the meeting on the 14th. So it'd be great to have you guys in on that, so that you'll be able to obtain a little bit more knowledge, as we all will try to do before we have the meeting on the 23rd.
Sure.
Is our agenda then to continue discussion of the Viewshed and Ridgeline?
Yes, Ridge Line and Viewshed, yes. As
Okay,
well
that's
as
gonna,
conservation. And another one that, 3 or 4 months ago, I promised, one of the other board members has worked on updating, if you will, the code of ethics, that I would meet with him before the end of June and get him on the schedule too, or get that topic on the schedule too. So if we have time at the next meeting, we'll open that up in that regard, but if not, we'll do it in the July meeting.
Okay.
Anybody else have any other questions?
I just have a comment here. I don't know if you guys have been reading the, dictation like across the bottom of the screen as we're talking.
Yeah.
If somebody were to read this, I don't know that they'd know what we're talking about at all, because some of the
I
words
noticed-
are not what we're saying at all.
I noticed that earlier, and I think the same thing, Terry.
I noticed when in that, did you say it just called him Jerry instead of Terry? And then when
Yeah.
we said Oriana earlier, it actually wrote Ariana. I thought maybe it was talking to Ariana Grande or something. I don't know.
They'll have to read Kim's minutes, which she does very well, to find out what the exact wording was. Can I get a motion then?
Hopefully she doesn't have to refer back to this.
Right. Can I get a motion that we adjourn?
I move.
so moved.
Got a second?
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? Not a vote. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Okay, passed. See you on the 23rd if I don't talk to you before then.